morning. Hello, and thank you all for attending the Ankeny Area Chamber of Commerce Legislative Update hosted by the Governmental Relations Committee. My name is Laura Book, and I'm the Director of Government Relations and Public Policy with the Greater Des Moines Partnership. I will be serving as today's moderator. The Chamber has hosted legislative events for over 20 years, and we continue to be fortunate that our elected officials are available to us for this dialogue. We look forward to hearing from Representative Heather Matson, Representative Brian Weldon, and Senator Mike Wieslow. Thank you for being here today. The Ankeny Area Chamber and Committee host these events for the purpose of informing and educating Ankeny Area Chamber members and residents of the Ankeny community regarding political issues facing or of interest to the community. It is an opportunity for you to have one-on-one conversations with your elected officials following the session. Please refer to the flyer that was handed out today regarding the format. This update will follow the act of civility. Civility is the act of showing regard for others by being polite. Civility comes from the Latin word civilis, meaning relating to public life, befitting a citizen. In other words, being friendly and nice to everyone. I would like to thank the sponsors of today's event. The Legislative Update Series presenting sponsor is Meridian Credit Union, with today's Legislative Update sponsor being Snyder & Associates. Please help me in thanking these sponsors. Now I would like to invite Polk County Supervisor Mark Holm to the podium for a brief update. Is he here? I don't think he's here. Okay. No, never mind. We'll go ahead to Mayor Bobby Vance here to provide an update on the city of Ankeny.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming today, and thanks to our legislators too, because I know they have a nice fun week ahead of them trying to wrap things up. So I'll be pretty brief. We have had a lot of boring city things going on, which is always good and bad, right? So on Monday we had a fairly long meeting, starting with a special meeting where we presented the budget information that is sent to your home. So if you got that letter in the mail we talked about last time, we talked about that. This coming Monday at 5:30 in this exact same space is when there'll be a public information meeting on the FY27 budget and the taxes. So that isn't a formal or official council meeting, but you're absolutely welcome to attend at 5:30. So we also, after that special meeting, went to our regular meeting and then had a work session. And in our regular meeting, two things I just think of interest. We had two public hearings on Monday night. One was for the next water tower, so water tower, elevated tower number 4, which is going to look exactly like the one that was just built on the north side that a lot of people really had interest in following. But it will be on the backside of the Neblin Center along the High Trestle Trail. So you may not know, but that's where a major water line comes through the city in the middle of town. And that water tower is 2.5 million gallons, I want to say, and the existing one on Ash is 0.5 million gallons. So it's 500,000 gallons. Anyway, significantly bigger. So we do not have the capacity right now to take down that Ash water tower and work on it or do anything on it because we would need capacity elsewhere. We don't have capacity elsewhere. So that'll be happening starting in May, and it'll run May this year to May of 28. So you'll see that very soon. Then we also had, if you live out in this way, it's important to you, most people probably aren't in that area, but the corner of Southeast Orr-Labor and Southeast 4 Mile, kind of an odd corner out there, we'll be redoing that intersection, putting in traffic signals, getting to be busier, a little more dangerous over time. We then went into a work session, and this is where we get into the exciting things the city does. We spent time talking about, over the last 8 years, we've been doing a rewrite and discussion of our subdivision and zoning code. So that really kicked off with the Ankeny 2040 plan in 2018. Many of the recommendations in that 2040 long-range plan were you need to update your subdivision and zoning code, which is originally from the 50s and 60s. That's 1950s and 60s. Imagine how large Ankeny was at that time and what development looked like. I actually joked in the meeting, did we tell people they had to fax something in? Our 22-year-old council member's like, what is a fax machine? So sometimes, we're trying to update major things, obviously, but also things like that just aren't current. So we, over the last year, staff has been working on that and really using the existing zoning and subdivision code and what will be the new code. And as projects came in or zoning requests came in or different things, looking at the two and seeing where they aligned, if we needed changes, how it was going to look, we're feeling really good about that. What that means though is almost every parcel in the city will have a new zone to it, even though it doesn't affect anything. It doesn't affect your tax rate or your type of property or anything like that. For most people, there's There's weird homes that are actually in what is now zoned like commercial and should be zoned residential. So there's little fixes that'll be happening as well, but so you'll probably hear more about that over the coming months. We then will have our public hearing certification of our city taxes on Monday, April 20th. All are welcome. Following that meeting will be a work session on local option sales and service tax. So Ankeny is one of 5 cities today in Iowa. 4 of the other ones, I've only heard of like 2 of them, and they don't even have a Casey's in their town. So it's kind of interesting that we're one of the only cities that doesn't have local option sales and service tax. As we've been looking at our budget, looking at things with property taxes, how do we alleviate the burden on property taxes to really pay for all the services in the city, this has been an option that's been brought forward as a way we could diversify away a little bit from property taxes. It's a way that we could also reduce property taxes for property owners. I don't know that we'd be able to do as a significant of any kind of a property tax relief in the future without loss, frankly. And we might be even looking at a tax increase in future years without loss. So we will be looking at that, talking about the referendum. In the way state law is written, you can only do public referendums in even years, so 2026, in September. So the vote will be in September. That's a question I think we'll probably get is like, why is it not in November? Well, it can't be. Like, it actually cannot be by state law. So it'll be September. So we'll be talking about the language in the referendum, the education out to the community, that kind of thing, what that looks like. And you'll see more and more of this, but fun fact, we've been looking a lot at like people who shop in Ankeny, right? When you look at data on credit card use, so we know kind of who shops and where they're from, we see, for example, like at Costco, it's about 80% of people do not live in Ankeny. So those individuals are using our roads, calling the police, using our services, those kinds of things, and aren't helping pay for the services in the community. Vice versa, when you are traveling anywhere except those 5 random communities that you've never heard of, you are subsidizing their city services today through sales tax. So that is something that we also should be participating in. Instead of us subsidizing everyone else and paying for our own, we should be paying for our own and having other people help subsidize us. So that's my brief spiel on local option sales tax. And then my last thing I wanted to mention, today, there is a very specific traffic enforcement effort happening in Ankeny for phones while you're driving. They're everywhere, they're pulling everyone over, you have been warned. That's all, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for that tip. I
You're
appreciate that. Lastly, I think Stephanie's here, yes. Lastly, I'd like to invite Stephanie Gott from Ankeny School Board to the podium for a brief update.
You're matching today, by the way.
Yes, tan is the color. All right, thank you guys for all being here today. I've just got a few updates. First one is on our field board vacancy seat. So we were pleased to announce the appointment of a new member to the Ankeny Board of Education to fill our vacant spot. At a special meeting on March 30th, we announced and appointed Erin Lee Schneider to fill that vacant seat. And she brings a strong service-oriented mindset, a clear understanding of the role of school board governance, and a collaborative approach aligned with our board's values. So we were really impressed with her. We also want to thank the 19 community members who applied to serve, a number which really reflects the strong engagement and commitment that our community has here. Next up is the GeoBond project update. On Tuesday, we broke ground. I think I see some familiar faces that were there at the Ankeny Innovation Hub, located at the Northview Middle School campus. The hub, along with our 2 comprehensive high schools, are going to expand opportunities so that every student, whether they're pursuing college, the workforce, military, advanced training, has access to meaningful hands-on learning experiences that align with each of their goals. We're excited to kick off construction, which is set to open in the fall of 2028. We're also laying new parking lots for Ankeny Stadium, which will open this coming fall. I'm sure everybody's happy to hear about that with football games. In the meantime, traffic flows around parking at Northview have changed, so information has been sent directly to families, but you can also find information on our website, and check that out if you're going to attend any events there. Last thing is some high school additions. So we're partnering with DLR Architects and Estes Construction to guide user groups through a collaborative design process that is helping define the scope of the high school additions that were included in the bond. This work includes active participation from coaches, teachers, and administrators across the district, ensuring that the spaces reflect a wide range of student and program needs. We will involve students. We kind of had this question the other day, and it was a good question. When are we going to involve our students in that process? So we will get some student participation once we kind of narrow it down a little bit. Those planned additions include expanded fine arts classrooms, dedicated music rehearsal and storage areas, and enhanced athletic and physical education training spaces. These improvements will feature indoor turf, running surface, retractable baseball and softball netting, and additional flexible use elements to support a variety of activities that our district has. And then last thing, we just wanted to close by thanking the legislators for their responsiveness throughout the session. I think I emailed everyone here personally and they all responded, so thank you. We remain in close communication to help provide context on how proposed legislation would impact our school district. Often it's the smaller amendments, those that significantly affect how we implement new laws, that can go unnoticed. And so we appreciate the attention and collaboration from our legislators. And we just appreciate the continued partnership as we work to enhance the educational experience for all of our students in the district. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Stephanie, for those updates. We'll move on to the legislative portion now. If you have a question, we have index cards available from committee members and on the table in the back of the room for you to write a question. I'll share as many questions with our panel as time permits before we conclude at 12:30. All questions will be shared by email with our elected officials following the update. We will also be recording this session and posting it to the event page on the Ankeny Area Chamber of Commerce Facebook page following this event. We ask that the recording be used in its entirety as shared with others. Before I turn the microphone over, I'd just like to note as well as we're going through questions, we're going to have a similar format with length of time, and then we'll also have the stop card there as well to help keep track. So we'll move into right now our opening statements. Now I'd like to turn it over for about a 2-minute update from each. We'll start with you, Representative Gustav.
If I got the memo on my tan jacket, I see some others, I could have worn that today too. So, but yeah, it's that time. What's that? My mic is not on? Oh, sorry, my tan. We'll skip the joke. I'm just skip repeating the joke. So it's good to be here. Thank you for doing this. It's a great way to interact with voters and in a public environment. So it's just the brief thing. House District 40, I represent all of Altoona, a little bit of Southern Ankeny, south of Oil River, east of 2nd Avenue, roughly. I zigzag in there with Representative Matson's district as part of that. You can literally be driving along, leave my district, enter hers, and Rancher line just along the same street. So it's a great district to represent. We've been through. I'm on Chair Ethics. I'm on Judiciary. I'm on Public Safety. I'm on the Ways and Means Committee this year, and I'm on a Appropriations Committee subcommittee called RIF, which deals with infrastructure matters. So that's all different stuff going on this year. The Ways is for me new. So funnels have passed. You've probably seen all that in the news and such. So now we're dealing with survivors and bouncers on bills, and just a kind of example of. I just pulled what we call our blue sheets. These are summaries that our caucus staff prepares for us for bills. We have them, the Democrats have them. So these are the blue sheets of bills that we've passed just since the last time we were here. And so it gets active. There's still some committee meetings and subcommittees going on with Ways and Means and Appropriations bills. We're working on those survivors and bouncers. I know Mike Bushel and I are working on a couple bills going back and forth between us, just some minor tweaks. So we'll send one back tomorrow with pre-agreed upon tweaks that I passed their chamber with one vote against, so I suspect it's going to be pretty well received in our chamber as well. And working on the budget. I'm not in the front seat on that, but I'm told that we're pretty close on budget numbers, so I think that'll wrap us up here soon. But it takes 2 to 3 weeks after the budgets are agreed to close down. So are we going to end on time, April 21st? No. We're not going to end on time. But it's not likely they're constantly doing either. And then working on property tax reform. So, and that's my 2 minutes. So this is where we are.
Almost 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Almost 2 minutes on the dot. That was perfect. Thank you. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you so much for having us. And I just want to point out that Bill is actually timing himself up here, which is some next level responsibility. pretty great. So Heather Madsen, House District 42, and a couple things I just wanted to mention is I'm the ranking member on the education budget and also serve on appropriations. So we certainly have had a number of bills starting to come through, approps, this week passed out of approps a $3 million appropriation for pediatric cancer research that I'm really excited about. So hopefully we can see that all the way to the House floor and then over through the Senate. Still waiting on a budget draft for education. I had a conversation with Representative Gelbach, who is the chair on that, earlier this week, and he told me soon. So hopefully we'll see something soon there to keep that moving. Outside of the legislature, one thing I just wanted to mention is I have had the really amazing opportunity over the last 10 weeks to serve, to be a part of the Ankeny Citizens Police Academy. And this year is the 27th class, and I just wanted to share what an amazing experience this is and what a phenomenal police department we are fortunate to have in the city of Ankeny, especially their community engagement team that puts this on, but having officers from all different parts of the work that they do come and share it has been really remarkable. And one of the coolest things I've had the chance to do, both as just someone who lives in Ankeny, but also from the perspective of a legislator. So I just wanted to share that because it is something that they do every year, and the next time it comes open, I hope you'll keep an eye out for it to apply to be a part of it, because it really is great.
Hello there, Ryan Weldon, House District 41, which is the north part of Ankeny, and I just want to start out by saying congratulations to the school district on breaking ground on the Innovative Hub. It's pretty wild to see a project go from when Dr. Pruitt first got here, when I was on the school board, and proposing a plan and seeing it go through this whole process that includes the voters. It really is incredible, and it's not easy, and so kudos to the school district for keeping that moving forward, and it's exciting to watch. I am the committees that I'm on. For those of you that don't know me, are Vice Chair of Appropriations. I'm Vice Chair of Economic Development Appropriations. I'm on Health and Human Services, Economic Growth and Technology, and Labor and Workforce committees. And so right now, pretty much the committee work is complete, and so we are now in the throes of the appropriations process. And for anybody that doesn't pay attention or really get excited about the appropriations process, I understand. But we have a few different committees that are appropriations committees. So Health and Human Services, Education. There's all these committees. They come together within the appropriations committee. They develop their budgets, and then we come together as a larger committee to then approve those budgets out of committee, which then makes up the larger state budget. And so that's the process that we're going through right now. I'm also very excited. I had the honor of helping, running the bill for the pediatric cancer, and we've identified places where that money's going to come from, and so that's a very exciting process that we've been able to move forward. But just to kind of wrap it up, it's been a really exciting week. Personally, for me, I've had two bills that I was running that the governor has signed, and a bill that came from a constituent that I had the opportunity to submit to and sponsor, and so that got signed by the governor this week. So it's been pretty awesome to see that process go through as well, and just really honored to be a part of the being able to help constituents push legislation that's important to them, and that's also good for Iowa. And so that's my 2 minutes, I think.
Thank you, and good morning. Honored to be here, honored to represent Ankeny in the Iowa Senate. I'm going to hold out hope that the 21st can be our closing date. I'm an optimist, I guess, by my nature. As a reminder, I serve on a number of committees. I'm Chairman of Commerce, Vice Chairman of Local Government. I serve on the Ways and Means Committee, the Appropriations Committee, Vice Chair of the Transportation, Infrastructure, and Capital Appropriations Subcommittee. I serve on the Administrative Rule Review Committee and on the Judiciary Committee, and there might be one more. The session, we've got a lot of major bills left to work on, including about, property taxes and investment in Iowa. I'm lucky to be working on a number of those, and will be floor managing a bill that I think is really important that hasn't gone under noticed, and that's regarding hydrogen development in our state. We're one of the few states they've identified that there's hydrogen below the ground, and this is something that could be a tremendous opportunity for Iowa landowners and Iowans in general, for economic development, for jobs, and for lower costs. I'm also working on an energy siting bill that can hopefully lead to less expensive energy for Iowans. A bill that everyone in here doesn't want to have to deal with, but will be glad that we get it done, is a towing bill that will help reform the towing process and protect consumers. And then I'm also floor managing in the Senate a bill that deals with repeat offenders and making sure that if, as we know, 1/3 of all crimes in Iowa and 75% of violent crimes in Iowa are committed by repeat offenders. And so how do we take a common sense approach to making sure that we're protecting Iowans and Iowa communities? And so we're going to continue working on that. We haven't come to an agreement or anything yet, but it's an important public policy priority, and I'm floor managing that bill. So I have a lot of work left ahead of me in between now and the 21st, but looking forward to it.
Thank you all for those updates. We'll move now into our question portion of the forum. This first question, we had several overlapping questions on this big topic, of course, property tax. So I think that's where we'll start today. Just to start, where is the progress on property tax relief? Representative Mattson, we'll start with you. Lucky you, I know.
Okay, let's start with the person who's not in Ways and Means. From what I know of the process so far, the Senate has passed a property tax bill. They did earlier this week. I'm sure Senator Buslow could give way more details on that than I could. As far as the House goes, I don't know if you guys have passed the bill out of Ways yet.
No.
No? Yes, no? I don't think so. Okay. So I haven't had a chance to take a really good look at it, waiting to see what's going to come out of Ways and Means as far as the property tax bill goes in the House. I do know, excuse me, one of the things that I am personally concerned about that's in the House bill, well, there's kind of two parts to it. So there's a cap related to fixed and variable costs, specifically, and I'm thinking about it from the perspective of community colleges. In the Senate bill, there is a cap just on the fixed costs, but on the House side, there's a cap on the fixed costs and the variable costs. And so when we're thinking about the variable costs, think about things like insurance, which, changes all the time. And so I know that the community colleges are concerned about what that could mean for them and their ability to actually pay for some of these costs. And if their projection is that if the House bill goes through as currently it is, that would be a cost of $130 million to them over 5 years across the whole community college system. So that'll be something that I'm keeping an eye on as the bill makes its way through the process.
Thank you. And I apologize, I should have said ahead of time too for these questions. We'll try and keep responses. You were perfect. That was about 1.5 minutes, just so we can move through a few different questions. I know these are complex and a lot to do in that amount of time, so thank you. Go ahead, Representative Walden.
Thank you. Yeah, hopefully between the four of us we can all cover something. I will just say, from a budgetary perspective, like it feels like this is late in session, but this is right about the time that we need to be talking about these kinds of things. So it is appropriate. We're not behind. We're pushing forward. Yes, it's a more complicated issue than most issues, and so that's why we may be going longer than the 21st. But we're still working on the property tax bill in the House. I will say that this is something that we're not rushing. We want true, meaningful change, and we want to side on the side of the taxpayer. And so the main things that we're looking for is to make sure that by the end of this session and by the time that we have an agreement in all both chambers and the governor's office, that we have clarity, certainty, and relief for Iowans. And what I'm excited about is we've been very forward about a 2% restriction on growth at the taxing entity level. And all the projections that I've seen are, from a state government perspective, we are below that 2% as well. So we don't just want to practice what we preach. And I think that's really important that we lead by example.
So the Senate passed a bill, and the intent behind the bill was to, broadly speaking, expand the base for tax revenue while driving down rates for commercial, industrial, and residential property class. The bill also included, as part of that base piece, increasing the amount that the local option sales tax would up to $1.25 cents, $1.25 or 1.25%, and it increased with at the rate of inflation, essentially, the gas tax. I did not support the bill out of the Senate. The increase for me, 1 in 3 Iowans are renting, and the idea of, at a time when affordability is critical, that we would increase on those Iowans the cost of their rent was something that was detrimental to me for what we're trying to accomplish. Additionally, I have challenges on the local option sales tax increase at a time when goods are more expensive, and increasing the fuel tax with an automatic CPI inflator. I want to take a really hard look at that, and seeing that, I think, in a standalone bill with the debate on the merits as a whole, or something I would value. So was reluctant to sign on. However, I'm committed to making sure, there's only so many things this Iowa legislature can do for affordability, right? We can't impact inflation, we can't impact interest rates, but we can do things to help make it more affordable to be an Iowan, to invest here, to grow your business here, to live here. And so I'm committed to making sure that we do something on property taxes for Iowans and give some certainty in this area.
So I share those concerns with Senator Buslow, and I looked briefly at their bill, but that multi-residential piece is a concern for me, because that's just going to pass on to renters or businesses or split. And then the gas tax, those are concerns for me out of their bill. But there's some things in there I think we'll work with. It's all a process. So their bill's not going to be the final product. Our bill's not going to be the final product. The governor's bill's not going to be the final product. It'll be some amalgam of all those different pieces together. And some, a whole bunch of things from our bill, but just some of the highlights I think that come from the bill we're probably going to consider and pass this week, would be my guess, is like government reserve. We have some communities, not most, some have like 80% or an entire year's worth of their budget saved, and they're still raising the taxes for current. So we're going to limit that to 35% of current budget for reserve accounts. We're going to propose prohibiting tax bonds for general operations. Borrowing for operations would be something we look at prohibiting. TIF, there's a lot of talk on TIF, and I think one of the common themes we're seeing is at least some time limit on it. So I suspect whatever comes out is going to have a 20-year limit, would be my guess on TIF. There may be some other limits around it too, but certainly looking at that. One aspect as proposed in ours that I liked and hadn't thought of was the burden of proof. I used to do property tax appeal work years ago, so if I went to appeal my property tax assessment, the burden of proof was on me to show why it's not correct. And that's going to remain unless the assessment goes up more than 10%. Then the burden's going to shift to the assessor to say, this is a little higher than normal. You have to, if it's appealed, you have to show why that's justified. We're trying to improve government efficiency, so $10 million government efficiency grant, so states, so cities and such can start sharing certain services, and some are already looking at and proposing ways that they can do that, so that's encouraging. The property tax statements, I get the statements. I think we're all pretty sharp people. I get those statements and I'm still scratching my head trying to decipher that. There's a very good one. In fact, we're probably going to pattern it after, our version will pattern after the League of Cities brought forth one that largely looks like one Minnesota did. And so it's readable. A taxpayer can look at it and understand what's going on. And then we're going to require annual updates from the assessors, so we can actually do runs on these things. And then change some things on bond elections, that instead of just having bond elections one after the other all the time, we're going to probably limit that. So thank you. I wasn't timing myself that time.
So so related to property tax, we have a more specific question along those lines. What is your position on the proposed property tax reduction and collective bargaining cities have with first responders? Historically, the annual increases for those unions have been 8 to 10%. Representative Belton, we'll start with you. Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, what is your viewpoint on the property tax reductions and how cities can work through their collective bargaining with first responders?
That's a very in-depth question. I don't have a specific answer to that particular part, but I, in general, want to ensure that the local taxing authorities have the ability to make the decisions at the local level. And I think what we're broadly looking at is a general cap on growth, so that our citizens at the local level have the ability to project and have clarity on what their tax burden is going to be year in and year out. So I think that's we want to give cities the authority to adjust those things while also staying within their means. And so I want to keep those decisions at the local level. I definitely support our EMS and want them to have the resources that they need as well.
Funding for law enforcement, fire services, EMS is, a critical and core service of local government, and an expectation from taxpayers everywhere that those services are going to continue to be funded. And ensuring that goes on is critical and as part of any property tax discussion, because part of the discussion is, over the past 10 years, on a statewide basis, local government has increased their spending by 110%. So more than doubled the spending on a local basis. And so I think the driving factor for the discussion legislatively is what those core services that should be funded by property taxpayers are, or by franchise fees, or by local option sales tax. What are those core services? Making sure that they're funded, and understanding that cities and counties are different. The last literature I saw from the city of Ankeny, police, fire, first responders were roughly 40% of our budget. In smaller towns, that can be a different percentage. And that's the hard part about legislating, is not, and I was talking to Dr. Pruitt about this earlier, and Ankeny is differently situated than a town in Southwest School District in Southwest Iowa, or in Northwest Iowa looks different as well. And so trying to accommodate for that, but understanding that a core service for local government is police, fire, and public safety and EMS, and making sure that can continue, but that also property taxpayers who fund that are protected in the growth that we've seen over the past decade that they're funding.
So briefly, that's one thing we have to look at is what are the functions and services people really want from your government, and willing to pay for them. So that's part of it. We need to look at that. Sorry, that turn on for me. So looking at the core functions, yes, but whether it's bargaining with unionized employees or having non-unionized employees, insurance costs, all these things are part of things that everyday businesses have to deal with. So when I have a business, we have to figure out how to fit all those things within our budget. So I don't know if there's gonna be something specific. The question's pretty granular, so I'm hoping I'm missing, but it's part of all the things that they have to figure out how to balance and budget for, and the bottom line has to pay. And these are all expenses that I, as a consumer, in my home, I'm trying to figure out. Nobody's capping my health insurance going up. Nobody's capping my auto insurance and homeowners insurance going up. So we struggle with the same sort of things. So I don't think we can just say to the taxpayer, well, we're going to put this cap, but they have unlimited amounts they can use for these other things, because that's not really any kind of cap at all on revenue. So I don't know how it's going to shake out, and I haven't seen a specific proposal on that specific subject matter, but to me it's one of the many issues you're balancing.
So I want to be cautious because I am not clear about specific language or what this is going to relate to. So with that caveat, what I will say is that generally speaking, I have a lot of concerns anytime we're talking about restricting collective bargaining for public employees. Our first responders were not included when collective bargaining was gutted in 2017 for other public employees. So when I, again, without having any idea what this language is, when I start to hear something about first responders into more restrictions related to collective bargaining, I start to have concerns, so I will definitely want to know more about this.
Thank you. I think we could probably fill an entire forum with that topic, so thank you for rolling with that. We'll switch gears a little bit here. There were several bills related to rulemaking that could potentially limit the power of future governors. Why or why not should those bills move forward?
I guess I'm not familiar with those bills. I serve on the Administrative Rules Review Committee, and I'm not familiar with limiting the powers of future governors in any of those bills. There was a bill, the only bill that has passed the Senate regarding Administrative Rules Review Committee is a bill that updates the law on uniform rules on agency procedure, the process there. The first uniform rules came forward in the 1980s under Governor Branstad. And before that, administrative rules, which have the effect of law, were being offered differently by different agencies. So the process wasn't all the same is the point. That then was updated again, and that was 85 originally. In 1999, it was updated again, and under Attorney General Miller and Governor Vilsack. And it has not been updated in 27 years. And so the idea here is that when an agency is going through the rulemaking process for 6 types of rules, that has to be a uniform process unless that uniform process will impede on some superseding law, right? Federal law requires something, or other state law requires something, and those exceptions still exist. I guess from my perspective, I don't see that impeding on the power of the governor or even enhancing the power of the legislature. I see that as empowering taxpayers because they have a reliable, uniform process for how rules are made, how they're noticed, how the hearing is going to go, the timelines for those rules, and how those are adopted and eventually become the effective law for you as a citizen or a business that has to operate under those. It gives transparency in that process. There was no power shift in that bill from my perspective, and that's the only one that's passed the Senate. I'm happy to answer if there's some other bill that the questioner had in mind, but I ran that agency bill on the floor. It had bipartisan support out of the Senate as well.
Yeah, I'm not aware of several, I mean, when it says several bills, there was the emergency powers bill that passed in the House, and that's not new. Some of us ran with that in mind, and some of us have been there several years, and so as any idea, it takes several years sometimes to get these things through, and it's often negotiations within your own caucus as much as it is with cross-party lines. So I think there's broad bipartisan, I don't know about in the session, but generally in the public that in emergency powers, there's certain things the governor shouldn't be able to shut down. We didn't here, but what we saw in other states were shutting down churches and other things while letting certain other establishments stay open. So we passed a bill that would have dealt with emergency powers and some limits on that. But that could have gone further in some opinions as well. So that's the one I'm aware of. We passed, the agency, that 17A needs some updates. So, and I guess one that came into that this week, it wasn't governor's powers. We were arguing over septic systems this week on that. I think we're all still a little scratching our heads. And I was a no vote on that, on the amendment to do that, not because and that's one of those few times I actually spoke on a bill that I wasn't directly involved in. I just said, I'm a no because we had the Administrative Rules Review Committee. They kicked it back. The legislature passed a bill, and in that case, DNR was trying to propose some new policy, and I just said, it's not the DNR's place to propose policy and make that law. It's their place to propose a bill that we can then run through the legislative process and turn into law. So, otherwise, I'm not sure what the specific is getting at.
So, because I don't have all of the bills we've done or have been proposed in front of me, I can't point to a very specific one, but there definitely, I know, have been bills introduced that would in different ways limit the authority of the governor. And I wish that I could remember them off the top of my head, so I'm very sorry about that. I generally have concerns about limiting authority or changing it in a different way, depending on what it is. I know that this sounds kind of like an all over the place answer, but it is not unheard of in the legislature to hear conversations from folks about being concerned about the possibility of a change in party leadership for our next governor. And it would be untrue to say that those conversations don't happen. And so anytime I'm seeing stuff like this, I think it is important that folks keep the politics of it in mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think the conversation is brought up largely in response to what happened during COVID and the response that the legislature had in COVID, which was giving that governor more emergency powers to respond. And so I think that's something that we're trying to right ship, and that's part of this. There is a bill that in the House and the Senate that would basically require the General Assembly to sign off on any bills that would, any new major administrative rules that state agencies implement that at least $200,000 in annual expenditures or significant effects on employment, competition, or investment, and that would be $1 million over 5 years. So in this effort that, when we're talking about property taxes, we're talking about states spending money, your money, by the way, not the state's money, it's your money. We are trying to be as create accountability where it can exist, and so that's all that it is. It's making sure that when we are spending a large amount of taxpayers' dollars, that the General Assembly, the powers that the checks and balances of the powers that are there between the three branches of government are working to ensure that those things are happening in the way that they should, and that you have a say in that process along the way. And so I don't know at this point, who knows if anything will happen with those bills that are out there. But from the general standpoint, I believe, from my perspective, that's why you're hearing the conversations happen.
Thank you. This next question relates to actually our update that we heard from the mayor. As you know, Ankeny will be considering implementing a local option sales tax. Do you support any changes to our current local option sales tax law, or as Senator Winslow touched on a little bit already, some changes in the Senate proposal for property tax? If you could just discuss those and what you support as well. Thank you. You are up.
So all right. Maybe it's hinting at me, I don't know. I haven't dug into the Senate specific proposal on the property tax. There's some shift there. I mean, the lost dollars, I appreciate that Ankeny has been one of the very few communities that haven't passed it. I'd like to see that continue, but ultimately it's going to be a local decision and by the local taxpayers. I am more sympathetic if you're going to impose a tax. It's kind of nice if you can get it from people coming through your community versus living in your community. But so I can see the trade-offs there, but I don't have a strong opinion on whether they should do it or not. It's more of a local decision. I think Ankeny's benefited to some extent because I do know a lot of people who shop in Ankeny specifically because who aren't from Ankeny, simply because they feel like they're getting a tax break on that. So I would proceed with caution is what I say.
I'm not super familiar with the proposal around changes to how the local option sales tax works, but I do appreciate the thoughtful proposal that Ankeny has put forward for what our local option sales tax could look like. So I'm generally supportive of us having it, given that every other community in the area does. So I will look forward to actually hearing how those conversations move forward in our community.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate the fact that we're having the conversation. I don't know that effective government is effective if we can't bring proposals forward and have the conversation as taxpayers, as citizens, in order to discuss and clear up the issue so that the best policy position goes forward. In general, I mean, what we're talking about is a consumption tax. I think consumption tax is a lot more palatable than you just being charged percentage because you own land and have a house here of property taxes. And so I have not formed an opinion yet. I guess I'm more focused on the legislative issues as it relates to the Senate's taxes in their bills. There's a gas tax in their bill that would adjust automatically if every year for inflation. I'm not generally in for an automatic tax increase without voters having a say, but we're still considering all the options, and in a package, who's to say whether or not that's the best option moving forward. So I would just say with local option sales tax, I like the fact that it's a consumption tax. I like the fact that we can generate revenue from people who are using our infrastructure, and so I think that's a positive step. And I'm excited for the conversation to have more of those discussions with all of you.
The Senate proposal didn't change any process around the local option sales tax. It just increased the amount that local government, city government can tax the sales of goods to people who are buying them from 1% to 1.25%. And I opposed that because of, frankly, the affordability of the economy right now, and increasing that tax I thought would be detrimental. There are 938 cities roughly in Iowa, and over 900, I think it's something like 905 of the cities or townships have passed a local option sales tax. And in each of those instances, I'm reluctant to raise taxes to lower taxes, because in my experience, they focus on the former and a little bit less on the latter. And that's at every level of government. And at a time when we face affordability as an issue, to raise that, I have challenges with. Now, I'm not familiar with the specifics of the Ankeny proposal and how it would affect and impact property taxes, and so I'm gonna save what my opinion is, because I don't have one yet. I would need to read the proposal and understand what they're trying to accomplish. I have great trust in Mayor Bobby Betts and the city council. I think that they are thoughtful in their approach, and it's something I would want to take a solid look at. But philosophically, I'm always wary of when government says we're going to raise your taxes to lower them, because I wasn't born yesterday.
Thank you. So we'll shift gears to another topic that's been a large topic of conversation around the Capitol this session as well. There was a recent report published regarding Iowa's high cancer rates. What legislation, if any, should be discussed to help improve those rates? Representative Mattson, we'll start with you. I'm throwing in all the softball ones.
Sorry, I was looking for my notes on that one. Yeah, we have incredibly high cancer rates, and they are growing, and it is something that needs to be addressed in a lot of different ways. I think we have to deal with water. That is a huge piece of it. That is part of why House Democrats have introduced our Iowa Healthy Water Act. I know I've mentioned it here before, but it does include things like a $600,000 statewide water monitoring program, increasing funding for the nutrient reduction strategy, clean water tax credits for farmers, establishing the Iowa Clean Water Certification Program, and creating an Iowa Water Quality Loan Program. So that's one component of things to work on. I'm disappointed that there seems to be a disconnect in what folks are really truly willing to discuss. I know there is a state senator, Senator Rosenboom, who took to the floor to talk about how it's ridiculous that my colleague, Representative Austin Baith, who has been working on this issue and is a medical doctor, who has been talking about water quality and Iowa's cancer crisis for years, took to the Senate floor to talk about how Iowa's water doesn't have really high nitrates, or that it's not really a problem if it does, because other things have nitrates like spinach. And it's just two fundamentally different things, because it is about how you consume nitrates, not just what nitrates are. And so it's really my hope that moving forward, this session and in future sessions, we can actually have, like, try to be on the same page of facts and a real thoughtful conversation on what can be done, because it's a really big problem, and it is true, it is probably not just water. I don't wanna make it all about that, but we have to be willing to have that conversation too.
Yeah, I share everyone's concern. I agree that awareness alone isn't the answer. That being said, we do need to understand what's causing the cancer rates to be so high, which is why we appropriated money to conduct research toward that effort. The preliminary findings showed a lot of things. One thing that it showed that was a large outlier was the lung cancer mortality rate. And so I think that's a good step towards finding real solutions. I also supported legislation we passed this session focused on empowering patients and physicians, including new continuing education requirements for doctors and expanding healthcare options by reducing bureaucratic barriers between patients and their treatments that they and the doctors believe are best. We talked about the pediatric cancer appropriation. The reason why that's so important is because right now we have children that are being treated with adult cancer treatments, and it's causing them, even if they're able to survive the cancer, it is likely that they'll be dealing with the effects of that treatment for the rest of their life. And so Nebraska has done this. They've researched for the last 10 years, and they developed 12 new pediatric cancer treatments. I think that's something we need to join the efforts in, so those are things that we're pushing forward with to continue this conversation and to develop solutions to reverse this trend.
Many folks in this room, I know, received an email from me about a meeting I attended last week that I thought was maybe the most important meeting I've been to in the Senate this year. It was a presentation by the University of Iowa and the College of Public Health and the Harvard College of Medicine on the key drivers of cancer in Iowa. And far too many of my friends, dear friends, are fighting cancer, family fighting cancer. Too many of us know too many people who are dealing with that very scourge every day. And this report I thought was very interesting because it studies the drivers of cancer and the highest incidences of cancer, looking at nationally and then putting Iowa into a cohort of similar states based on education, healthcare access, demographics, and then from there, from the region into a county-by-county basis. And the discussion was informative because it's taking into account and even analyzing. Iowa has a tremendously available healthcare system, more than most states, and so more people find cancer or are diagnosed with cancer in Iowa than in some other states who just never get diagnosed. Also, looking at things like environmental factors. The University of Iowa doctors talked about water, in fact, specifically, and saying we can't rule that out as a factor, as an environmental factor. And common sense tells all of us that there's something maybe in the water or something with chemicals on farms. And but what science also tells them, and they said this, is that not all of us have the same water for all of our lives. We don't drink from the same source consistently. So testing that and having science lead to that being a definitive indicator is really hard to nail down because of the varied nature of the water that we consume. And what I took away from that, and this study's ongoing because, as we know, cancer can be something that you started 5 years ago with a behavior that leads to cancer 5 years later. And so it's an ongoing study to study the cancer rates and the drivers in those rates with recommendations that will be forthcoming. And I think it's critically important that as we as a legislature and policy-making body who has no ability to act with a scalpel, but instead much more in terms of amputation, that we do it with at least the most data-driven scientific approach possible, understanding that our dollars are limited and that we have to do it in a way that is the most targeted and most effective possible. And so listening to those experts from the University of Iowa, listening to experts nationally, looking at what other states have done effectively, I think is the best approach to how we act, because it's not it's driven in a way that's gonna lead to results for Iowans who need and want and deserve to see action on the topic.
Okay, this is where, at the point where everything's been said, but not everyone's had a chance to say it, so, without repeating everything, yes, getting answers is key, because even in that report the study that was released, chemicals on farms and stuff probably are part of the problem, but farmers have 13% less cancer incidence than the general population in Iowa, so that is not the problem, and that's, so part of what's when we deal with policy up there is, everybody comes and they've got their answer and their solution, that's it. And so we're trying to put together a wide tapestry here, these sorts of things. So we really need to, and we're putting money into research on that. Last year we passed $1 million at the governor's proposal. This year there's a proposal for $3 million for studying children's cancer in particular. I think that's what Representative Weldon was referring to. And we found out that, that study, that lung cancer is really the outlier here. So so we've done some things on radon. We're doing some radon mitigation and testing and things like that. Skin cancer is a big problem. We've done some things with tanning beds, so there are different things that we're looking at doing. And is any one of those the answer? No. Again, we're trying to, as Mike said, we're trying not to just cleave off an entire arm here. We're trying to figure out where we can surgically apply some different things, but we need good data to do it, or we're gonna throw a lot of good money after the wrong solution.
I'll just add briefly, if anyone would like a copy of that report, I'll email me and I will get it back to you. There's already folks in here who've received it from me, and I'm happy to provide that report. It's very, very well done, very in-depth.
I just want to add really quickly too, because thank you, Phil, for bringing up the tanning bed piece and the radon piece. Both the work on the radon bills and the tanning bed bills out of the House has been done on a really great bipartisan basis between Representative Bates, who I mentioned earlier, and Representative Hans Wills, who are both very passionate about the topic and have made major progress. And on the tanning bed bill specifically, I'm hoping that Mike, that you will think about this, because it's a bouncer that has come back to you again, that the Senate sent it over to us, taking out language around having to explicitly say that tanning can cause melanoma. And we said, no, it does, and that language should stay in there as the warning. So I hope as the bill bounces back over to the Senate that you guys will just agree with us and say, fine, sounds great.
Sounds like a typical day in the legislature,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Thank you I appreciate your thoughtful answers. That was a really good response on that. Our last question, we touched on this a little bit already, I think in the openings, what Senator Bissell specifically had mentioned. Representative Weldon, we'll start with you. What is your position on Iowa's consumer protection laws, particularly in regards to towing a vehicle?
I mean, I feel like this is the easiest answer in the world. I'm absolutely for consumer protection laws, and I'm for that towing bill. It's been a priority. It's been brought up a lot even before this session, and so I think that we need to do everything that we can to ensure that everybody is protected, especially in this day and age when you have artificial intelligence that is creating scams and things that are fooling people, because it is so realistic. And so we as a legislature, we are continually talking about what are the policy changes that we can make to keep up with the technological changes, but also we have to be careful because anything that we pass could also stifle a legitimate business trying to do a good thing. And so we have to measure both sides, and that is part of the conversation, especially in the Economic Growth and Technology Committee that we've had around AI legislation. And a big reason why you're not seeing a lot of states pass AI legislation is because of that balance that we have to play. But yeah, I'm definitely for that bill.
I've been surprised how contentious of a legislative issue it has been. It shouldn't be. I mean, nothing should surprise me anymore. But I look at it, I try and look at it from a pretty common sense viewpoint, where if a car is towed and has to be stored, there's a cost to that, and that towing company deserves to be compensated for what they've done, the service they've provided, and storing the vehicle. But there's an owner of that vehicle, and they also deserve and should know within a timely manner that their car has been towed and where it is and how they have access to it and what the costs are gonna be associated with that. And that's important because there's not just the folks that own the car, but there's also people who've loaned money to make that car purchase possible, who have an interest in that vehicle, a secured interest, to use a really legal term. And the people who have that car and have it towed, if they can't get it out, I think it's also common sense to say that they should have access to get the important things that they need in their life out of that vehicle so that they can continue living if they can't afford to have it taken out, in a timely and orderly fashion. And then, overall, there should be, an ability in a fair way for those, them to get their car back if they can, and if not, for that car to move through the process and payments to be made equitably from the proceeds of the sale. The other part of, the other side of the coin is, I think the vast majority of us here and attending a Chamber of Commerce forum would say if any of our cars got towed, we'd probably be up in arms right away, want to go find where it was and get it out so we can go about living our lives. Not everyone has that luxury for one reason or another, and so there's also important protections that need to be there for making sure that the folks who are providing that service are protected, that they do get compensated, and that there isn't necessarily carte blanche to see it as a windfall to look at what cars got towed and what might be in them and get goods that aren't there. So to me, again, I think it's a pretty common sense approach. Like, if you get your car towed, you should know it got towed, where it is, how much it's gonna cost to get it out, if you can't get it out, to get your stuff out of it, and to keep the process moving along. I think that's in everyone's interest, and I think we'll get a bill done this session that accomplishes that, protects the consumer, but also understands that the towers have a complex and really thankless job in the role, but also a role that's important.
Thanks. So, actually, consumer protection law I'd like is to figure out how to stop these fake lenders from calling me. I've been offered, just sitting here 3 times, $70,000 lines of credit.
Nice.
So I can just borrow my money and disappear, and that's fine. So sorry, I was messing with that. I haven't seen that specific bill, but it's not in the committee I'm in, so I watch them as they come forth. It's usually as they get to blue sheet level, right? They come out of the committees and then we all start looking at them, unless we have a specific interest in them. I do want to be cautious though. Sometimes we all do this. We create our straw man or our boogeyman, and we set up so that it's this, and therefore they're all bad. And so I think Mike was hitting on that. We do need to watch the balance there to make sure that legitimate businesses and because some people park where they're not supposed to, their cars are going to get towed, and we're also not happy if our parking lots are taken, or somebody's parking in a handicap spot that's not supposed to, or things like that. So we need a room for legitimate business to operate. But yes, consumers need to know all the things that Mike listed. I don't need to list all of them, but so I haven't seen that bill. I'm interested in seeing it. I'll be watching for that we don't over-regulate on something versus doing what we need to do to protect consumers.
So I'm incredibly happy that legislation is finally moving forward because I first introduced the bill in 2024, or a version of it. The bill that I introduced in 2024, it was a bipartisan bill in the House, is along with Representative Young and Representative Losey, and then Representative Ken Judge as the other Democrat on the bill. And it's great to finally see some movement on it, other than getting it out of a subcommittee. I think it's important to think about where Iowa falls when it comes to towing practices and predatory towing and consumer protections. So there is a group that, it's a public interest research group, USPIRG. They, a few years ago, put out a report that compared state by state some 14 main protections for consumers related to towing. And the more you have, obviously, the more consumer protections you have. Iowa had 2. So clearly there's a lot of work that needs to be done in this arena. I introduced legislation again this year that is more comprehensive than the bill that is making its way through the legislature this year, that would have actually made a new section in code that was just very specific to non-consensual towing, so that companies that are, just the really good responsible actors, which is the vast majority of towing companies, aren't going to get penalized for the practices of the folks who are not doing right by consumers. And so while that bill is obviously not moving forward this session, I'm really glad to see in other pieces.
Great, thank you to you all. That was our last question. Just wanted to extend a thank you for generously providing your time to be here today, to answer our questions. I know they're complex, so we appreciate you giving such thoughtful answers and feedback. Again, we'd like to thank our presenting series sponsor, Meridian Credit Union, and today's event sponsor, Snyder and Associates. This concludes our events for this legislative season. Thank you for attending, and thanks for being a part of it and submitting your questions. We appreciate your participation. Thanks for attending today.